Good morning, Mindset Recovery friends. This is Roberto. So, if you've seen any of my previous videos, then you know that I have been on this journey seriously for over 2 years. I have been on this journey of trying to get clean and get free from addiction for 35 years. I realized early on that drugs were going to kill me and that I couldn't stop. So I tried by self will all the efforts that I could muster to stop on many occasions. I learned about Narcotics Anonymous in my early 20s, and I went to some meetings. I got a sponsor. I started reading literature. I started working steps, but I was half measures availed us nothing, they say. And yeah, I don't even know if it was a half measure. It was thought about and pondered about and attempted, but I was not able to apply the principles that were set before me successfully in order to get clean. I have talked about before, I moderated my use to the point where it wasn't so negatively impactive that I ended up. The program of Narcotics Anonymous says jails, institutions, and death. Well, I never went to jail for drug related offenses. I was in jail overnight a couple of times for drunk driving. But for me, did not face I did not reap the consequences of my actions. And so therefore I justified in my mind that, I was bulletproof. I was going to make it. I should have died a lot of times. I should have gone to jail. I should have got busted. But I, dealt drugs and, excuse me, drank alcohol and drove and did drugs. And I convinced myself over 35 years that I wasn't going to die. That was foolishness. But the fact that I made it home on so many occasions, drunk, not remembering driving home, not remembering how I got home without wrecking my car or getting arrested, just made me think that I was different than everybody else. And clearly I was better at driving drunk, or, clearly I was smart enough to be able to get away with things like dealing drugs. Clearly, I mean, I don't know that the drugs weren't going to kill me. So anyway, that was foolishness. And only by the grace of God did that work out. But and I had a semi, from the outside my life, if you would have talked to people that I knew, especially since I made it a habit of hanging out with people that I thought were worse than I was, drank more, did more drugs, wasted more money on drugs, whatever. I felt superior to the people that were around me. I was different than the people I chose to hang out with, but I wasn't any better. And that's what the program of Narcotics Anonymous teaches me with anonymity. So I am just like all other addicts in a lot of ways. Of course, we're all individuals and we have different things. We use different drugs, we used in different ways. We went further down the elevator, some of us than others. But that is my pride telling me that, hey, I'm not as messed up as you. I still have a house. I still have a car. I still have a cell phone. I'm a productive member of society in my mind. Um, and that's a trick. That's what my addiction uses to tell me, hey, it's okay if you do this because you're still okay. And so I knew that I was on a destructive path and that it wasn't going to end well, but I couldn't stop. Every time I would decide that I wanted to use, I was so impulsive that I was using before I even thought about it. I remember times earlier in my life when I was much younger, that I was trying not to get high. And then the next thing you know, I I had the opportunity to get high, and I was high before I remembered that I was trying not to get high. So it became habitual for me, and then it became a need to deal with things for me. That's how I dealt with life. Anything not going my way, I got high. I used negative behavior patterns, what we call character defects, using people, taking advantage of situations, sex with people to make me feel better about myself, whatever it was, I used it to help myself feel better. And then eventually it stopped working. I didn't feel better. Now, they say that doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, is insanity. But for me, I did it for so long that I wasn't expecting different results. The only result that I expected to be different was that I thought one day I would figure out how to control my drug use. And that is not realistic for an addict. Um, but as far as the fact that I was going to spend money that I didn't have, I was going to come, slowly commit suicide. I was going to feel like crap the next day. Um, I, I just, I was hopeless. I knew that things were going to turn out the same way every time that they had the hundreds of thousands of times that I had tried them before, but I didn't know what else to do because I knew the answer was to stop using, and the way to do that had evaded me. And the thing was, I was exposed to this program very early on in my life, and so I had the tools offered to me in order to make it happen. But this program is a very simple program, but it is not an easy program. It takes self-discipline. It takes applying the principles that we learn. It takes reaching out to people in our network when we want to use. It takes delaying gratification. As an addict, I wanted to feel better now. And, when I did drugs, when they were working, I felt better immediately. And so that is another thing. It's a control issue. I know what I can do right now to stop feeling bad, to stop obsessing about this thing that's going through my head, to get some money, whatever it is, I knew how to do it right now. The problem with that was that I did still have consequences, but it instead of delaying gratification, I delayed consequences. So learning to be a person who can wait for something, it's not easy, especially when you weren't raised that way. I mean, I learned that I could get what I wanted when I wanted it by manipulating whatever it was, and that's how I operated. And so I manipulated people, I manipulated places and things, and when it worked out the way I wanted it to, that just reinforced my belief that I was different, or had some kind of power, or was smarter, or whatever it was. That was easy for me to say, hey, something special about me. I know how to work this out. I know how to make this happen. And a lot of times I did make it happen. But like I said, the consequences were delayed, so maybe I didn't die. Maybe I did get to do a lot of drugs. Maybe I did get to sleep with some attractive young females that made me feel like a man. Um, but I paid for it because I was miserable. A lot of people in the program talk about how they just didn't want to live anymore. That's not my experience, but I wasn't trying to die, but I knew what I was doing would eventually kill me. And a part of me, my disease kept telling me that it wasn't going to kill me. And so I wanted to hear that. And so I would be manipulated by my disease to continue to put myself in danger of dying. But obviously, deep down inside, I really did not think that this disease was going to kill me. But I did believe that I was going to use for the rest of my life. And I knew that I was shortening my life by using, but I could not stop. I was using against my will. So in 2019, I had a stroke. And then, I realized that I should have died from that stroke. And I almost felt relief when I was in the hospital because I was like, well, I've been trying to quit for a long time. I had been praying to my higher power to help me quit. And I knew something bad was going to happen. And I kept saying, when I would pray, if you don't do something, I'm going to die. So you got to take this away from me. But what I found out was, that's not how my higher power works. I know that I was protected in all those situations when I should have been dead, but it didn't mean that I wasn't miserable. I was spiritually bankrupt. I was miserable. I hated my life. I trudged along. I was killing time. And so when I was in the hospital, I felt a sense of relief that, now something major has happened. This will be my bottom. I had had a lot of bottoms that I thought were rock bottom, but somebody said once in a meeting that every bottom has a trap door. And, I identified with that, but it also kind of made me mad. So anyway, I knew where I needed to go because when I got out of the hospital, I was convinced that I was not, that was the motivation, almost dying, being messed up from a stroke, having physical limitations now, that was it, that I was going to be able to say, hey, I just can't do this anymore. And by the power of my self will, based on those experiences, that I was going to finally be able to do this thing. And that was not what happened. I got out of the hospital. I had a lot of self pity because I knew it was all my fault. I knew that I was messed up and almost died from using drugs over a long period of time. I didn't like do a big pile of drugs and then fall out. So it wasn't a direct result of using in that, like somebody, gets a hold of some bad drugs and it messes them up, which is an everyday occurrence. Many of those people, in my experience, they just die. They don't come back from that. But for me, it was, continually using and running my body down and messing up my health that eventually my body couldn't take it anymore. When I was in my 20s, I could do that stuff. It wasn't good, but my body was resilient and strong and youthful. And then here I was 53 trying to party like a 20-year-old, and it just took its toll. It didn't take me long before my body just couldn't take it anymore and it said, I'm done. And I fell out. I got up one morning I had to go to work that day, got up, went to the bathroom, and all of a sudden I heard bells, and I thought, if you've ever heard Pink Floyd, that song Time with all the cuckoo clocks, I heard that. And I heard it so vividly that I thought that my son had it on a ringtone on his phone or was playing it on his computer. So I reached over and pushed the door shut to the bathroom so that I didn't have to listen to that noise. And it wasn't outside the room, it was in my head. And then I knew something wasn't right. I didn't feel right, but I didn't realize that I had had a stroke. And then when I went to walk back to my room, I couldn't walk. And so I had to crawl back to my room, and I just went back to bed because I didn't know what was wrong. And so then I normally drove my son to school, and my alarm went off and I couldn't get up and turn it off. And eventually it went off so long that it woke him up. He came in, and that was unusual for him because I always got up when the alarm went off before him and got ready and then woke him up and then, had our morning routine. So he knew something was wrong. And he asked me because he also knew I had to go to work and I always went to work. That's one thing. That's one of the reasons I thought that I was better than other addicts because I went to work. I might have felt like butthole, but I went to work because I needed money to pay my bills so that I would have a place to do my drugs. And I didn't want to be homeless and I needed a car and I needed, a phone and all that stuff, and I needed to have money to buy drugs. So I went to work. So he knew something was up. This is not dad. And he said he turned my alarm off and he's like, Dad, are you getting up? I gotta go to school. And I was like, no, I don't feel good. I'm not going to work today. So I think I got him to bring me my phone. I texted my boss and told him that I was sick and I wouldn't be in. And I went back to sleep. Well, I woke up later on. I really, it's all fuzzy. My son knows a lot more details about it than I do, but because it's kind of fuzzy. I mean, I had a stroke. So I woke up later and then I needed to call him to help me to the bathroom so I could go to the bathroom again. And, I was not doing good and he was scared. So he called 911. The ambulance came and, they came in and started to examine me and stuff. They did not know what was wrong with me. All they knew was I didn't feel right. I was dizzy. They said that I can't remember what they said it was, but something, to do with being dizzy and not feeling good. So I refused to go anywhere with them because I knew that it was going to be expensive. I didn't think there was anything they could do about it. I didn't realize how serious it was. So I sent them away. Well, then, the next time I woke up or my son woke me up, whatever happened, and I still couldn't get up and walk around. He's he was 16. My daughter is 15 years older than him. She does not live here, so he didn't know what to do. So he called his sister, and I don't remember. I think I probably talked to her on the phone, told her I was fine. Don't worry about it. I just need to sleep. So she called 911 and she told him what was up. She goes, "This something's up with my dad." I didn't hear the conversation, but basically she told them to take me to the hospital and not to listen because they were like, "Well, we already went out there. He doesn't want to go." And she was like, "Don't listen to that old man. He needs to go to the hospital. Something's up." And so the ambulance came and they weren't taking no for an answer. And they took me to the hospital. Now I sat in the ER for 7 hours and the local hospital here did not know what was wrong with me still, but they knew something was wrong. So they did some scans and they also knew that I was in no condition to go home. I mean, obviously, I couldn't drive. I didn't have my car there anyway because I went by ambulance. So they put me in a hospital room. They did the scan. They put me in a hospital room. Well, they sent the scan to a big regional hospital here in North Carolina. They have some good hospitals. And they looked at the scans and they knew that I had had a stroke. Well, this was way after the fact, obviously. So I'm not a doctor. I don't know what they can do, but it's my understanding that if they catch it early enough and they know what's going on, there's treatments. But, I mean, by this time, the next morning, whenever they woke me up, they were like, well, we sent the scans to Baptist Hospital in Winston-Salem, and they said you had a stroke, which was not real comforting that the hospital that I was at had no idea what was going on, but at least I knew what was going on then. And I stayed in that hospital, and then I got transferred to another hospital because of insurance. And I ended up being in the hospital for 24 days. And it was right around Thanksgiving. I don't think I would have gotten out when I did, except for I was doing well enough that it's my experience at hospitals. like to get rid of the people that are in there that can go home around the holidays for whatever reason. There are staffing issues. You want to be with your family. I don't know what the deal is with that, but that's what happened. So I was in the hospital for 24 days. I went home right before Thanksgiving. I my walking was severely impaired. I needed a cane. Cognitively, my brain wasn't working right. Um, but I was okay. People tell me now that I was slurring my words. I was hard to understand. Well, that's all foggy to me. I don't know. But anyway, the whole point of this is I ended up still using after that. I had a lot of self pity. I felt bad. I felt sorry for myself. I felt guilty for what I had done to myself. I wished it wasn't that way. I wish that I had been able to stop sooner. So then, that was the very end of 2019. Then I'm stuck in my house. I can't drive my car because when you have a stroke in North Carolina, they take your license for 6 months and then you have to get evaluated by the Division of Motor Vehicles to see if you're safe to be on the road. So I couldn't drive. I was stuck in my house. I was very, very feeling sorry for myself. Um, and so then, I had been drinking before I had the stroke, but I would get up and go to work. I might feel crappy in the morning. I might have to, do some drugs to wake up. I think that has a lot to do with it. I was using drugs to wake up and motivate to go to work. Then I was getting off work and before I went to bed, I was using alcohol and drugs to wind down. So yeah, that was not good for my central nervous system in any way. So then I'm stuck in my house feeling sorry for myself. And I had been drinking almost every day, not mass quantities, but, to go to sleep. And so then now that I'm stuck in my house, I don't have anything to do and I'm bored and I'm feeling sorry for myself. My alcohol consumption increased. Well, I had been using other drugs. Um, and so, I couldn't drive. Then I didn't have a job. I did have some credit cards, but if you don't have a job, you can't pay your credit cards. But I didn't care about that. I would drink alcohol and then lose my inhibitions. And then I would call an Uber to come pick me up and take me up to the bar where my drug dealer hung out. And I would buy drugs and then I would get a ride home. I would stop and get more alcohol on the way home. So I knew that I almost died. I knew, and I had thought that I'd be able to quit, but clearly that was not the case. And so then I was hopeless, and I got the gift of desperation. And I was like, well, the only way that I am going to be able to stop using. I knew about this program of Narcotics Anonymous. I started off in AA and I went to outpatient rehab. They gave me some accountability because I had to take drug tests and I wanted to get out of there. It gave me something to do. Then the pandemic started and it was the only thing I could do to get out of the house. They were coming and picking me up and taking me to my group. So then to get out of there after I'd been in there for a long time, I don't remember how long, but months and months, and I was tired of it. They wouldn't let me leave unless I had some kind of a program in place. And they suggested 12-step programs. And I had been in AA and I was aware of the program. And I knew it was basically the same thing as Narcotics Anonymous. It was just focused on alcohol. And since I had made it sound like alcohol was the big problem because I was, prideful and for some reason, it didn't bother me as much to admit that I was an alcoholic even though I knew I was an addict. And I'm sure they knew anyway because I had to tell them when I went through the intake and all that. But they allowed me to go into AA. So they got me to some meetings and then I got a sponsor and then he started taking me to meetings and I started working the program of AA. Well, my experience is that the way 12-step programs work for people is there's identification in the rooms. When you hear people share, you understand that they're going through the same kinds of things that you went through, and you see how their life was, um, what they did, and then how it's changed. Well, I didn't have a lot of identification in AA. I had some. I understood what it was like to be an alcoholic because I was, but that wasn't my drug of choice. And even though I used it regularly, I used it so that I could lower my inhibitions so that I could go do drugs. I would say, well, I'm not going to do drugs tonight. I'm just going to drink. And then, out the window goes that. As soon as I start to get drunk, I'm like, well, I'm really go good with this if I pour some dope on it. And so, I don't think my level of drinking would have killed me. Maybe, maybe not. It would have killed me driving in a car, probably. But as far as, my liver being fried or anything like that, or just falling out one day or having a seizure, I wasn't at that point with alcohol. But when I drank alcohol, then I was like lighting a fuse, and then I was off to the races to go get what I really wanted. And my drug of choice, that was raising my blood pressure. It was really messing up my health. There was a good chance of me having a stroke or, overdosing or dying or something. And so I knew that that needed to quit and I couldn't stop. So I had a friend, this is weird how your higher power works. I had a friend that was actually the guy that I was buying my drugs from. He got busted and he had to go to Narcotics Anonymous as part of his court thing. And he was apprehensive about it because he'd never been in any 12 steps. He knew that I was in AA, but he had to go. I don't understand how that works, drug court, something like that. But I know that people are highly suggested by a judge to go to that, or they get to go to jail. That's their choice. So he didn't want to go to jail. And so he decided to go to NA. And he was friends with me and he knew what had happened to me. He came and visited me in the hospital. I'm sure he felt responsible, even though he didn't hold me down and pour the drugs up my nose. He was selling them to me. And so he felt guilty about it. I don't blame him for it. I would have bought them from someone else. But anyway, I went and met him at a Narcotics Anonymous meeting one day because it suggests in the program we go to 90 meetings in 90 days. My sponsor wasn't real particular about what 12-step program that I went to, if I needed to get a meeting in that day. So basically, if I went to an NA meeting, that would count. I was going to an AA meeting at noon. There was an NA meeting at noon. I met my drug dealer there, and the rest is history. I walked in that room, and it's the same program, but I felt an identification that I never felt in AA because for one thing, around here, most of the guys that were in the program and the women, they had been sober for years and years and years. So I identified with, their unmanageability in their lives and their powerlessness over alcohol. But when I walked in a room full of drug addicts, I was home, man. Those people knew that was my brethren right there. And I felt a love and acceptance in there that I have never felt. And I had gone to church and I liked church and I felt love and acceptance there, but I felt like it was superficial. I felt that way, whether it was or not, I don't know. But in NA, they just gave me permission to be a mess. And then they promised me that they could help me get clean. And I saw a bunch of people sitting around that were screw ups just like me, but they weren't using drugs anymore. And so I knew something was up. There was something real there. And so I kept going. I did my 90 meetings in 90 days. I got connected with a sponsor. I was reading literature, and my life slowly but surely started to transition. And so, it took me about 2 years from when I went into outpatient rehab before I got clean the first time. Um, because what I would do is, all I ever wanted to do was use like a non-addict. So, somebody who just drank on the weekends or just did Coke once a month or something like that, that to me was ideal. Can I do that? I still want to do what I want to do, but I'm just doing it too much. Um, but I'm not that guy. I can't do that. If I put it in my system, I'm done. So the first thing that happened when I was taking drug tests and being held accountable was I got to the point where I was just using once a month. And I was really using they pass out the welcome chip and then you get a 30-day chip. And man, every time I got my 30-day chip, I was like, wow, I did this for 30 days. Now I can get high. And then I'll just pick up another white chip. And so I justified it. I was like, I'm doing better. This is all I ever really wanted was to just get high once a month. And I did that for 2 years. And it was better. It wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't freedom, but it was less destructive. So it was really easy for me to get into that pattern. And I did that. But I couldn't continue to do that. When I started working the program, I knew that that was not enough for me. I wanted complete freedom. I wanted to be clean. And so eventually I got to where I could get some time clean. And I had a couple fumbles and had to start over again. But I've learned how to not get high. And when I got here, I did not know how to not get high. I also know enough to know that if I have a fumble and I use, that I'm not clean anymore and that I have to recommit myself to this program. So I went 15 months completely clean for the first time in my life that I can remember since I started using. And I decided that I was going to drink a beer. I wanted to drink one beer. I didn't think it was a big deal. I wasn't going to tell nobody. So I did drink a beer. But then I knew that I had to get honest about it because with the spiritual principle of honesty, any cracks in the armor, eventually you're done. That's what I've seen. So even though I wasn't going to tell anybody, I wasn't proud of it. I didn't think it was a big deal. I told my sponsor and he held me accountable and he said, hey, you're still in recovery. You're still doing good. You don't have to start your steps over, but you 100% absolutely have to surrender and pick up another white chip because that's pride right there. I didn't want to admit to anybody in the program that I had blown it. So he held my feet to the fire on that. And that was 7 months ago. And, thank God that one use relapse was not as bad as it could have been. I didn't die. I didn't continue to use. But who knows what would have happened if I wouldn't have recommitted myself to this program. So, I haven't gotten high or drunk in May. It'll be 2 years. And that's awesome. My life has changed drastically. I am a productive member of society now. I have a good job. I help people with my work. I'm a peer support specialist. I help people find resources to improve their lives. I work in the program. I do service. I chair meetings. I work the Narcotics Anonymous hotline. Um, I don't have sponsees because NA suggests that you have a year clean before you sponsor somebody. I've worked enough steps in order to sponsor somebody from that angle. If I had a year clean, I just finished my seventh step and went over it with my sponsor. And I'm getting ready to start my eighth step. So typically they suggest that you have a year clean and that you've worked a fifth step at least with your sponsor. So, I mean, I qualify in the step part, but I don't have sponsees because when I reset my clean time, I could have been had a sponsee before that because I had over a year, but I didn't feel like I was ready. Now I, I mean, there's nothing in the literature that says you can't sponsor people with less than a year, but it's highly suggested. What I see in the program is that suggestions are based on experience that people have. and they don't just throw suggestions around. So it's a good idea to pay attention when somebody with clean time or the literature suggests something to you, because it's just not coming out of left field. So, but I do work with people. I have people who I'm an accountability partner. They call me when they're struggling. I share in meetings my experience, strength, and hope. All that kind of service helps me stay clean. And so I am clean today. And it is because of the program of Narcotics Anonymous. And it says that if you want what we have, you have to be willing to do what we did. And so I have been applying these principles and working the steps and going to meetings and doing service. And those things have helped me get out of myself. Addiction is a self centered disease. This helps me focus on other people. It helps me not obsess over my own self. And addicts have good instincts, but they make bad decisions. That's what my sponsor told me. So I know what I should be doing, but I can think myself out of that good decision really easy because I think I'm so smart and I'm going to just figure it out. And I'll go from knowing that that's a bad idea to talking myself into doing it. So, anyway, my name is Robert. I am Roberto, and I am clean today because of this program. And, keep fighting the good fight. If you want to talk to me, if you email me at my personal email address, which is piaster67@hotmail.com. If you put mindset recovery in the subject line, I will get back to you. I will help you find resources on not money resources, but resources of 12-step recovery, things like that. But anyway, so have a great day. Thank you very much.